welcome to the podcast. We're so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I have read a couple of your books over the last months since Love Magic first came out in the Bad Valentine series, but much more recently, Surreal Estate. And I loved that book so much. And I really wanted to get you here to talk to us about it because you've got that and Love Magic both recently on audio this year. Tell us a little bit about Surreal Estate, what it's about, and how you came up with this wonderful story.
So I have a low writers group. We're meeting pretty regularly, and sometimes as any conversation with writers go, we just start brainstorming weird stuff. And so we started this conversation about bullshit superpowers, like superpowers, like if you had that would be like sort of useless, like the talent of always having ink in your pen, like things that like, oh wow, I have a superpower, but what do I do with it? And so the idea came to me is, what if I was a psychic with an affinity for houses, but I'm homeless, So it was sort of like that irony kind of thing. And then we were like just shouting ideas out about it. And I'm like, and what if you fell in love with a house flipper, And I don't know, it was kind of like a comedic sort of feel. But when I went home and started actually writing it, it did not come out as a comedy at all. That's not how the character spoke to me at all. So yeah, that's where it originally came from. So the story is about a young man who is down on his luck and he's homeless, and he has an affinity for spaces. So if you think of that saying, if these walls could talk, it's that sort of emotions that people have inside of a room imprint on the space itself. And so that's kind of where the idea came from. And so this young man, Sasha, is able to go into homes, usually it's more common with homes, and maybe see visions of the past or feel feelings that are in those spaces. So he is squatting in an old abandoned house when it is purchased on a foreclosure sale by a house flipper who is Nick. So that's how Sasha and Nick get together.
And there's such a delightful pair. I mean, one of the things that I liked right away about Nick is that he didn't just throw Sasha out. He thought about it, but then he didn't. Mm-hmm. And it's just, there's such a sweet kindness that runs between these two.
What I wanted to bring across there is that at different parts of our lives, we can be down on our luck. And sometimes it just takes a little kindness from somebody else to get us back on our feet. I grew up in a pretty poor family. We weren't homeless by any means. We always, my mom did her best to take care of us and stuff, but we were pretty poor. And, I have a soft spot for people who are in rough situations. And so the character that I relate to most in this is Nick. And I would like to think that I would have, I in good conscience couldn't have put Sasha out right away. You know what I mean? That would have been me. That would have been me trying to figure out, okay, how do I help this person? And I also didn't want there to be a power dynamic between somebody with a bunch of money who's sweeping in to make Sasha's life better or whatever. I needed Nick to have a financially insecure situation also.
And he certainly did. Even have the mob kind of funding his flip, just threw another interesting layer on top of the story. Mm-hmm. You added some interesting stuff into Nick's character as well, because he really discovers his bisexuality in this story.
Yeah, Nick is 39, and it was important to me to show a character who is having a bisexual awakening for the first time at an older age. And because for me, sexuality is something that is fluid. It can, it can grow and change. I know certainly for me, that's been my case. I'm 44 years old, and I've always been in relationships with cis men. But 2 years ago, my husband came out to me as trans. So now I have a wife. And, when someone transitions, it doesn't change your sexuality just because your spouse transitioned. You have to sort of come to terms with how your sexual attraction is. Not everybody can make a marriage work when there's a transition involved, but I've always sort of had bisexual tendencies, even from a young age. But I guess I sort of thought if I was always with men, it didn't matter. Like I didn't want to come out as bisexual. It felt inauthentic to come out as bisexual when I had never been with a woman before, if that makes sense. Like I'm going to lose my card or something. And I know it's my own hang up. But with my wife transitioning, and she is very much a girly girl in every way, that I've had to come to terms with what my attractions are. So I do consider myself pansexual now, and I would have been about 42 when that happened. So I relate to Nick a lot in that way. And it was important for me to show that it wasn't out of the blue. This wasn't like I'm only digging one person kind of thing. I made sure to show that he'd always sort of had bisexual tendencies, though just in his head. And I also wanted to tell a story where somebody came out that was positive. Nick wasn't ashamed of it. His family was supportive. It just felt good to tell that kind of story. In a story that's so heavy like Surreal Estate is, to have that one element go very smoothly was important to me.
I really liked how you treated it as not gay for you, as you mentioned, because that is not my favorite trope out there in the world. You did give Nick those, I won't say tough internal conversations, but he did work his way through it, and he did come out to his family, and he was a little skittish about that. So it all played very real world to me, and you didn't gloss it over, which I thought was quite wonderful.
Yeah, that was my goal. I mean, yes, it is nerve-wracking. The first time I told my mother that my, spouse, who I had been married to for 16 years at that point, was now transitioning to be female, and I am perfectly cool with that because I'm pansexual too, So that was a hard conversation, even though I was well into adulthood. So, but it was fine.
Did you set up Nick this way because of what you were going through at the time, or did these two things just kind of happen to connect at the right moment?
Out of all the characters, I relate the most to Nick. Nick is my personality. I'm impulsive and a risk taker, and a lot of things about Nick reminds me of myself. And so I did purposely write Nick to have like a bisexual awakening, because I just thought it was important to show that. That doesn't mean I'm going to do it in all of my books or anything like that.
All the stuff that you did with the house flip, and even how the houses spoke to Sasha, did you set up your own magic? Because it was really a fascinating aspect of the book, how the houses spoke to him.
I have a young adult series that I wrote, the Arcadia series, and that was a series that revolved around psychics. So I've sort of been in like a psychic mind frame for probably 10 years now. So for me, I mean, this was the first time I wrote somebody with this type of talent, but this was kind of it was my own invention. But I do have a thing about visiting psychics, which is, well, I mean, I'm pretty agnostic in just about every way. I'm sort of like, I don't really believe, I don't think this is a real thing, but maybe it is. And so I'm known to visit lots of psychics. I've had past life regression. I've had, tarot, numerology, astrology. I've done all of that. And most of my experiences have been laughably bad. I have not found very many psychics that had much of a talent at all, but there was one that I 100% believe that he knew things. And his name was Paul. I don't know his last name. I can't remember it anymore. I had his business card at one time, but he had given a reading to my mother. I dragged her along to a psychic fair, which is a thing I do. And so she got a reading from this guy, and it was so scary, spot on. It was just shocking. The level of detail he got into was just shocking. So the next time the psychic fair came in town, I made sure to go see him specifically. And he, again, gave me a really phenomenal reading. So I don't know. Are psychics real? I have no idea. But this guy seemed to really, really know what he's doing.
That's very cool. I mean, you've got some of the in-person interaction to kind of feed the books a little bit. And I love kind of what you did with the house too, because the houses actually occasionally push back on Nick. So there's a little bit of life in the house, and that was very interesting to see how all that played into the story.
Yeah, I tried to walk a line between the house. The house is sentient, but it doesn't like it doesn't talk to him. It doesn't like, he can't have conversations with the house necessarily. The house is a character in the book in a way. Yeah.
Definitely. So another one of your stories that is on its way to audio, might be out by the time we get this on the air, is Love Magic, which was your entry in the Bad Valentine set. And again, we deal with a little bit of paranormal magic things going on in this story. Tell us about this. This was such a super cute entry in that series.
So Jordan Castillo-Price, Deb Bentham, and Claire London and I thought it would be fun to take one line. We have the same first line. Nothing good ever came of a Valentine. And write a story based on that. Just like see where it would take us. And the only rule we had is that it had to be a short. So the audiobook for Love Magic is only an hour long. So it's a short story. So it had to be a short installment, and it had to involve paranormal somehow. So that was the only thing that we had. And so the four of us just started going on this Valentine story. And so that was really fun. So Love Magic is about a musician who is performing in a park one day, and this magician comes over and starts performing with him. And it's a love story between him and this magician. And it's kind of like every date they go on is a disaster. So I don't really want to talk too much about it. It is a short story, so it's hard to talk about without giving spoilers away.
For sure.
Yeah, so I don't know when it could release anytime. It's been sitting in review for a long, long time. But hopefully it comes out, very shortly.
This was so cute, especially their disasters. And you like magic, paranormal a lot in your storytelling, because of course Arcadia was also dealt in some of these same themes. What is it about that attracts you to using it in your stories?
So, I like paranormal. I like to read it. It's not all I read, but I like it. And I like the way you can break boundaries with it. But as much as I like to read about vampires and things like that, I mean, we all know vampires aren't real and werewolves aren't real and stuff like that. But like, there's this thing with psychics, like, yeah, it's not real, but maybe it is. Maybe, And so I always try to write my psychics in a way that it could be real. That there's a scientific explanation for it. Like, you guys don't know this because I didn't put it on the page, but I have a reason for all of this. in the back of my mind of how this all fits and how it works logically. So, and for me, it's genetic. But I like the idea of psychics because you can do a lot of different stuff, like the talking to houses. You can pretty much do anything with a psychic power. And like in Love Magic, my magician is a telekinetic. So, yeah, I'm just attracted to psychics because there's so many different things. I feel like if you're writing like vampires, there's like rules you have to follow. And if you don't follow those rules, like you suffer from vampire fans everywhere. And I don't want to deal with vampire politics in my real life.
I totally understand. And that was what I like so much about Surreal Estate. I mean, you built these guys to be so in the real world, with Sasha just having this little tweak. I told you before we pushed the record button, I want to give them an HGTV show because I would totally watch that. Them flipping houses and Sasha being able to sort out what's wrong with the house, or even if it's not flip, I mean, go in and redecorate and then help them figure out how to make the house happier with the people who are in it. There's so many options there.
Yeah.
Do we get to see any of these characters come back in future stories? Do you see additional things in the Surreal Estate world?
So here's the thing. I was about halfway through writing the follow-up to Surreal Estate, which was going to be another story with a different couple, but Sasha and Nick were characters in it. And I got about halfway through it and I hated it. That's common. That happens.
It happens.
To me. The halfway hate point. I always get to that. But I had another story idea that was really hitting me hard in my head, and I couldn't shake it. And so while I'm struggling to write this follow-up book to Surreal Estate, this other idea just won't go away. So finally, I just decided, I'm going to set this book aside and write this other story. Even though it's completely not what I should be working on, it obviously wants to be told now. And it's very different from anything I've ever written. In fact, I might even put it out under a different pen name because there's no paranormal in it at all.
Oh, wow.
I'm deciding about that. I don't like the idea of a new pen name, but it's a really deeply personal story to me. And, I'm probably about 3/4 of the way through writing it now. So I don't know when it's going to be finished. I don't work well with deadlines. I'm a slow writer. So we'll see. But I do have a plan for the Surreal Estate universe. I planned 3 books.
Cool.
So we'll see if they come out.
Okay. And now you've got me super intrigued for this other thing that's not paranormal at all. So besides the magic paranormal kind of playing into your stories, do you have favorite tropes that you are attracted to working with?
I have tropes that I hate. I don't like tropes with a big imbalance of power. So you won't see me writing billionaires who are scooping up their, just graduated college people and, something like that. Or, I don't mind an office romance, but it has to be done really, really delicately for it to be something that I like, so I would never write it. So I don't like power imbalances. I don't like billionaires because I feel like when your characters have too many resources, you're taking the tension out of the story. I like to write people who are broke. I relate to being broke, so I like to see stuff like that. I like to see people who are good communicators. So the misunderstanding trope, I'm not into that at all. Nothing will make me put down a book faster than this whole plot can be wrapped up with a phone call. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are the plots I really avoid, or the tropes I really avoid. It was really important for me to write a Bisexual Awakening story for Surreal Estate and for Nick because it was very personal to me. But I probably won't do that again. It's not going to be like my signature that's in all of my books.
I like that you went with the flip of that question. I may have to ask that side of it more often.
I get way more irritated with books than, yeah.
Well, and according to your bio, you read like 200 books a year, which is a big wow. Because
I
I'm lucky to get through like 70 or so.
I have an illness. I'm a book hoarder. I own, I think, we're in the neighborhood of 3,000 paper books. I probably have that on my Kindle, and I think 2,000 audios. So I'm a hoarder of books. I never borrow a book from somebody because it won't leave my house again. And I pretty much read everything. So I go in stages where like I'll be on a Russian novel phase and I'll read all the classic Russian novels, or I'm in a paranormal phase, or I'm in a sci-fi phase, or whatever. So I just read a lot, and I like audiobooks, and that helps me increase my book count, because now not only am I reading after work, but I'm reading during work, which is always great.
Yeah, audiobooks. Once I got really into them, it was such a godsend to get my overall reading way up by like double,
Mhm.
really, because I always have an audio and a or a paperback going at the same time.
Yeah, I usually have two audios going at the same time. I like to listen to nonfiction before bed. I'm an insomniac, so I have a whole thing, a whole ritual around going to bed at night. I've got a couple of podcasts. The Sleep With Me podcast. This guy reads, or he doesn't read. He just rambles on. He tells these long, boring stories with no plot. So it's enough to keep your head listening, but like if you fall asleep, you're not going to miss anything because there's no beginning, middle, or end to these stories. So I like to listen to him, and then I also like will listen to like different nonfiction books at night when I'm falling asleep. Just basically, it can have a plot, and then I have something that I'm reading during the day that you know whatever it is, usually fiction. I'm more of a fiction person than a nonfiction.
What got you started writing? Was it all the reading that you were doing that got you going?
Probably. I've always been a huge reader. My mother was a voracious reader also, so I learned from the best. When I was 8, I wrote a story that was turned into a children's book. So, like, I mean, it's not that impressive. There was only a couple of copies made, but like, because I did this book, it was like in local dentist offices and stuff for kids to read. I don't know. Because I did this, they sent me to this young writers conference. So I got to go to this like conference at the college. So I always thought writing was cool, and it was, but I actually through high school and stuff, I always assumed that I would go into music. I used to sing, and I used to like theater and things like that. So I thought that was the direction I was going to go. But when I went to college, I ended up just really loving my writing classes. And so I ended up majoring in creative writing and literature.
I was going to ask how you came to write romance too.
So it's what I read. Like I was on an kick on my reading. And my best friend is a pretty popular writer, and she and we would brainstorm a lot together. We have like we have like a Skype conversation like every month to sort of like brainstorm out our stories and stuff like that. And I was really struggling with a book that I hated, which happens sometimes, and she just said, "Why don't you just write because that's what you read, it's what you like." And yeah, okay, I'll give it a shot. And so that's when I wrote Surreal Estate. So
That's awesome. Any particular authors influence your author career and have helped you power forward as you've gotten going in the genre?
Jordan Castillo-Price is my friend, and I am completely in awe of her writing. I love everything that she's written. I started as a fan when I met and we lived locally to each other, so we got to be friends. But her books just speak to me. I love her use of paranormal elements. I love her characterization. And she also hates the same tropes I do. So she doesn't use those tropes. So her characters are always broke. So I love that. And some other authors that I really, really enjoy in the world are Alice Winters. I love her use of comedy. It's genius. It's genius. It's spot on. Tal Bauer is another one that I really love. Tal Bauer is an auto buy for me. His Executive Office series was just phenomenal. So I like Jordan for the paranormal, Alice for the comedy, and Tal for the explosions.
Can you imagine like all three combined into one?
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. That would be amazing.
Now you hinted at this non-paranormal that you're working on. Is there anything else like floating around in your head that you want to tease us about?
Well, the non-paranormal one that I'm writing right now is about a young man, just graduated high school, who was raised in a religious cult. And he is leaving the cult. Well, he's being escorted out of the cult, basically, because he's gay. It's a deeply personal thing for me because it was one that I was involved with, a cult that I was involved with in a former life a long time ago. And I finally feel like it is time for me to write that story. I feel separated enough from it that I've been out for 18 years. So I feel separated enough that now is the time to write that story. And it's going really well. I mean, it's flowing really well. I'm sort of at that point where I hate it, but I think I can push through. I don't have a title for it yet.
This is the second one we've talked about that's got autobiographical elements as well. Has that always kind of been the case in your work where that sort of real life for you feeds in?
Oh, yeah. Even with like Sasha's mother is a drug addict and my father is a drug addict. So I could relate to Sasha on that element too. So yeah, I would say a lot of especially the really emotional pieces of my books are stuff that I've experienced before or are related to me somehow. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to, they always say in like writing class, which I don't agree with fully, but they always say, write what you know. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's not write what you know, because I don't know any psychics that, are vampires or whatever, but it's write what you can emotionally connect to. And I think if you can, as an author, can emotionally connect to the story that's being told, then it's going to come across as authentic.
Well said. What is the best way for everyone to keep up with you online to see when these next books come out and when Love Magic does come out?
Yeah. I am on Twitter at Jesi Lea, all one word, and that's spelled Jesilea. And I'm on Facebook, and I don't have a personal Facebook, so my Facebook is pretty much just me. So you can look me up on there, and I'm on Instagram, although I have like very few followers, and all I do is post pictures of like my cat. But you're welcome to follow me if you'd like.
Fantastic. We will put links to all of that in the show notes, along with the books that we talked about. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us about both Surreal Estate and Love Magic.
Thank you.